All right. It is 2:05. Good afternoon, and welcome to session 3.1. It is nice to see the room filling up. Just a note that we are recording this session. It will consist of two presentations, Taking Care, a well-being initiative, as well as Do I Have to? Change Management Principles for Academic Libraries. There will be a Q&A session after each presentation. So please type your questions into chat. With that, I will go ahead and waste no time and turn things over to our first group of presenters.
Hello. We're happy to be here at the LAUNC-CH annual conference, and we'll be presenting on a UNC-Greensboro University Libraries initiative on well-being and development. Leah has placed the Go link in the chat so you can get to our slides if you're interested. And I'd like to present Leah Leininger, our liaison to the School of Nursing, the Department of Communication Sciences and Disorders, the Department of Nutrition, and to the Genetic Counseling Program. My other colleague is Marcie Burton, Electronic Resources Cataloging Technician, and I'm Christine Fischer, Head of Technical Services. Next slide, Leah, please. The Wellbeing and Development Initiative is one component of a broader university libraries effort. A little over a year ago, Mike Crumpton was appointed our interim dean. Based on internal conversations, discussions, surveys of library employees, we wanted to look at our activities as a whole in a new way. Next slide, please. The Administrative Advisory Group, which is the department heads, folks supporting communication, development, and EDI, and two staff representatives met to consider modifications to our strategic plan. Slide. The outcome was to create 7 initiative teams with chairs from AAG. An invitation was sent to all employees to select a first and second choice for teams they were interested in serving on. Participation was not required. Even after the original makeup of the teams, individuals could volunteer to join. So our team, we added several members to later in the process. And for each of these teams, the participation did cross all departments in the libraries. We were all working remotely due to the COVID-19 restrictions when the teams were being created. The Wellbeing and Development Initiative team was an effort to look at self-care as well as working compassionately with colleagues and supporting one another. We chose to divide the effort of our team into 2 areas. Marcie became the team lead for the resources area, which she will talk about. I became team lead for the programming area, and Leah will give details about that work in a couple of minutes. Members of the team volunteered for whichever area interested them. The expectation for the team were to develop a list of resources. We also wanted to plan or promote programming, partly to ensure that employees had development opportunities with the knowledge that some employees had less work that they could do while working remotely. A particular focus was made during December and January when classes were not in session. The work of each initiative team will be shared at the AAG mini retreat to be held next week. One question for our team is whether it should continue to conduct business or whether the activities can be incorporated into the staff development committee. And I have met with the chair of that committee a couple of times already to share our plans and look for points of connection. So next, Marcie will talk about resources.
Hi. As Christine stated, we created 2 groups, and I'm Marcie, lead of the resources group. We created a Google site that would be available for our faculty and staff to use. Next slide. This is the Google site that we created. Using a Google site was just the easiest thing to do since we use Gmail and the Gmail suite. And we also developed 2 different tabs since we are the Wellness and Development Group. So under wellness, as you can see, there are different links, different groupings or categories, groups that are available on campus and off campus, articles, some ebooks, podcasts, videos, links, and apps that can be downloaded from the App Store or Google Play Store. One lesson that I learned that as we were working through this is that people were very willing to share their experiences as far as sites they frequented or podcasts they listened to or etc., articles they had read, things that helped them maintain a healthy life that they really wanted to share with other people. And under our development link, we have links for professional development. And also there's still some mindfulness links within some of those links also. Thank you, Leah.
All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the programs that our group coordinated. So basically, since we had several groups on campus already providing well-being and wellness programming, we partnered with them. We gathered some information about interests that our coworkers might have in wellness and well-being, and we made contact with partners of content providers to see what they had that might match or could be tweaked. In November 2020, we sent a Google poll out. It was anonymous. It was meant to be very brief and very easy to respond to. You can see the first question up on the screen. Well, a simplified version of the first question: which areas of wellness interest you? Physical, social, emotional. In the actual poll, there were some prompts after each of these choices. The next question was, is there a specific topic that interests you? And we also asked a question, are there any well-being or wellness resources that you think the rest of us could benefit from? Or do you know of any speakers or presenters who would be useful to bring in? And it was a useful poll. It was nice to gather information. We definitely tried to make it short and brief. If you're looking at this question and thinking, well, if I tried to answer this, I might be a little adrift. I might not know exactly what to suggest. There were a few prompts at the very beginning of the poll, a link to a multicultural wellness wheel in case people had time and interest in exploring that, and also a link to some previously recorded wellness sessions from one of our partners, just so that people could get ideas on what might be possible. The responses were used for planning with our partners. So, of course, which programs did they already have that would match up with what people were interested in? And of course, are there things that could be tweaked a little? And is there any new programming that we could get? And that definitely takes time to develop. We did share information internally with other library groups. One of our partners is Healthy UNC-G. So this is the employee wellness program at UNC-G. They have a wealth of resources and services for us and other employees. But the thing is, during the pandemic, we were all really busy just kind of trying to keep our boat afloat with everything going on. We might not have been thinking too much about wellness, and certainly not what is Healthy UNC-G still around? What resources and services are they offering? So in December 2020, the director of Healthy UNC-G provided a webinar that was an update on their services. How have things changed? What are they still offering? Plus there was a guided meditation. So things like the free fitness classes for employees that used to take place in a facility on campus, now they're online. Also, some of the nutrition and healthy eating sorts of programming, for instance, programs about shopping and healthy cooking on a budget, cooking classes, those have been moved online and they're still taking place and they're fun. One of the services that was sort of on campus, in person, face-to-face, that still occurs that way is the fitness lending library. This is one of the really fun things about Healthy UNCG. You can check out fitness equipment and it will be delivered to your workplace at the UNCG. And when it's due or ready to be turned in, they'll actually come back and collect it for you. So there are a lot of really nice services available. And we were so happy that they could come in and give us an update on that. And of course, they've had other programming and webinars going on, and we've promoted some of that. Another partner that we found through Healthy UNCG is called Healthy Relationships Initiative. This is a group that works to promote safe, healthy, and happy relationships in every aspect of people's lives. And they work on UNCG campus and also in the broader community. And a nice thing for us is that they have taken their programming online this past year. A session that they customized for us, they presented a webinar in January called Healthy Relationships in a Remote World. So topics included the challenges of working remotely, also being intentional, tips on a range of topics, including setting boundaries, video etiquette, share what you know to help other people grow. They have a lot of really nice webinars and online resources. So if anybody here is interested, in the slides, there's a link out to their website. So advice. I think I would definitely emphasize, try to make this a discussion. If you want to have a wellness or a well-being effort at your library, make it a discussion. Don't make it top down. Contribute your talent. Be giving with your talent. Encourage others to contribute too. So if somebody is really into mindfulness or stress management and they want to share some of that with other people, that's great. But at the same time, make it voluntary. Don't put anybody on the spot to learn and teach mindfulness or stress management or something, because that ends up being not such a good thing. Another thing to consider is confidentiality. So wellness is definitely about how we can be happier and healthier and safer. There's a lot of positivity in trying to make change, but at the same time, sometimes when you're discussing things, people might share things that normally they wouldn't with coworkers or supervisors. So within the planning team, we used the Chatham House Rule. So we decided we would share information outside of our meetings, information that came up, but we wouldn't identify the person. And another big choice on the sort of participant side is record the session or not. We recorded the sessions, but one of our partners pointed out to me that it's really important to adapt how you're doing this. And you want to think about advising people to mute their cameras if they want to. Of course, you let them know the session is being recorded. Best practice is always going to be, when you're in an online session, to repeat back questions and comments that come in through chat. But it's best if you do that in a non-identifying way. So I see a good question, or what a good point, instead of identifying the person. That will encourage the conversation to move along, and the information will be available later in recording, but won't be as much part of the record. And of course, make it easy for participants, if it's possible. If you can manage to get a session going with no RSVPs, that is hard for the organizers, but for participants, that can be the easiest way for them just to get in. Of course, if you're working with other people, make it as easy as you can on them, and of course yourself. So get the information out there, share what you know, be open to change and suggestions, but don't let getting everything just so stand in the way of helping people. Thank you so much. And are there any questions? I should point out the time. I think we have 5 minutes for question. Am I right, coordinator of this session?
That is correct. I do have a quick question. What do you envision this program looking like as you transition back to more on-site work?
Well, I think that you bring a good point up, that we feel that we need to continue this work, and we are in the process of trying to develop a couple of sessions with partners on campus. We want to keep doing this work at least through all the remote work that's been going on. But beyond that, I'm taking this information of what we've been doing to the AAG retreat, and our whole team is meeting together to talk in anticipation of that meeting. We're going to consider how it might be folded into our staff development committee, because there already is a group that is in existence. So we don't really want to interfere with their plans. So we want to see, and when I talked with our chair of the staff development committee, he said, well, maybe we just add 1 or 2 more people to the committee. And we'll also, of course, want to keep the resources going. So we're not quite sure how this is going to morph, but we feel like there's going to be a bit more cooperative beyond just this team.
That's great. And I do see a good comment in our chat here that we want to thank you, and noted that we really like the collaborative nature of the program, that it's not a top-down initiative.
Yes, we like that too. And we like that people from throughout the library could just share their interest in which team they wanted to join, and then be as involved as they'd like.
And I would like to point out the link to the website is on the slide. So that's available for anyone to look at. Of course, some of the links may not be available to you because you have to have your UNC-G credentials, but you're more than welcome to look over it.
Great. And there's the link also in our chat if anyone is interested. Okay. If there are any other questions, please bring them up now. If not, I believe we will move over to our next presentation. Let me switch out our spotlights here.
Can everyone hear and see and all those wonderful things?
I believe, Scottie, if you could turn your camera on for just a moment, that will allow me to spotlight you if you would like. There we go. All right. I'll turn it over to y'all. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having us. We're very excited to be here. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about change management principles and how we might use those in our library work. I'm Allison Cruse. I am a research and instruction librarian at Western Carolina University. I'm also the liaison to all of the programs within our College of Business.
And I am Scottie Kapel. I'm the Scholarly Communications Librarian at Western Carolina University and the liaison to criminology, criminal justice, and emergency and disaster management. So today we are going to cover a few different things. First, we're going to define what exactly change management is, We'll look at the steps of the change management process and then discuss some opportunities for implementing and evaluating a change management directed project in libraries. And we'll have some time at the end for questions and answers. So what exactly is change management? In essence, change management is an approach to managing change that recognizes the effect of that change on the people involved in the process. And resistance to change is not uncommon. A lot of us take comfort in our routines, or we've witnessed or been part of a poorly managed change in the past. And what this process seeks to do is get the individuals involved in that proposed change on board so that they're aware of what's going on and involved in the decision-making process. And typically, change management is used to direct large-scale intentional organizational change. So a lot of the literature you might find on it is looking at the process through that lens. But there is an opportunity to bring components of this process to smaller scale, more adaptive changes, the likes of which you frequently see in libraries.
So what is the change management process? There are multiple models out there, and if you dig into some of the literature, you're going to see a lot of examples of people kind of putting their own spin on it, maybe rebranding it with their own name. But regardless of which title you choose to read up on or use, there are a couple of main categories that provide an overarching understanding of what the change management process looks like. And those are define, plan, implement, and sustain. So you're probably already familiar with processes that look like this, and you're actually probably already doing a lot of these things in your work without realizing that they're related to change management. So there are, of course, smaller, more granular steps under each of these headings, and we will dig into those here in a minute. But just for now, these broad categories do a good job of explaining the flow of the process. So how does this apply to us in libraries? As we've mentioned, change management was sort of originally intended to be applied to large-scale intentional change initiatives. And we certainly have those types of projects in libraries, but we're probably more likely to be encountering things more along the lines of reactive change. So I know we've all undergone a lot of change here in this past year. We're hoping that maybe some of you could throw into chat just a quick example of a change that your library has gone through in this past year. So that can be broad or narrow. It can be universal or very specific to your particular library. We're just nosy and thought that maybe you would share something with us that you've changed in the past year. And while you do that, I'll just share with you that, we came up with a few examples of the types of changes that we're all pretty likely to encounter at some point in our careers. So things like budget changes, process changes, policy changes. These are all fairly ubiquitous situations that we all find ourselves in. So Scottie, did you want to?
Yeah, so some online only instruction, the move to remote work, some changes in positions, on-site schedule rotations. So a lot of things that we've all kind of become accustomed to with this new COVID-19 environment.
Super fun. We're all loving it. So we wanted to share with you an example of a change that we recently went through at Western. So just a little bit of background here. Our Collections Advisory Committee, or CAC, for which I'm actually a representative member from the Research and Instruction Department, we were charged with identifying resources to be cut due to a stagnant budget situation. For a variety of reasons, we targeted our Springer and Sage journal packages, but we were very fortunate that we were able to earmark some funds for individual title pickups based on teaching faculty requests. So this was a major cut to resources that impacted nearly every discipline. So in this situation, CAC was being charged with orchestrating a less than ideal change impacting a large audience during otherwise unstable pandemic times. So super easy, no sweat. We're doing great. The big project came in the form of facilitating communication around the cuts, both internally within the library and externally to the university at large. and then developing and managing the process that would be used to collect and rank the requests that came in order to make our purchasing decisions. So in my role as a member of CAC, I tried to integrate my corporate background in change management into this process the best I could. And here is what that looked like. So in the first stage of the process here, the define stage, we sought to clarify the reasons behind the cuts, identify who the change would be impacting, establish timeframes for the project, clarify who was supposed to be doing what, and identify how we could define a successful project. So at this stage, CAC decided it would be best for our subject liaisons, given their subject expertise and faculty relationships, to be the primary communicators within their departments. So CAC would develop the plans and the process, and then we would be asking the liaisons to execute on that. I will say that a lot of the steps in this define stage can sometimes feel like excessively low-hanging fruit, kind of like those days where we write rush teeth on our to-do list just so you can have a super easy win because we need it. And that is fair, although it is important to point out that there's a lot of value in being purposeful and specific during this step, because it really does set the stage for the rest of that project. So moving into the planning stage, CAC is reviewing impact studies that were done previously to see what disciplines would be the hardest hit, and try to make our decisions as equitably as possible moving forward. We created communication plans for our various stakeholders. We put together tools to facilitate engagement and transparency, like an external facing LibGuide, an internal facing shared request spreadsheet. We put together a feedback form. And we identified what we thought the biggest risks of this project would be. So namely things like anger or damage to our relationships, and thought through ways that we might mitigate some of those risks ahead of time. So moving into the implementation phase here, CAC was relying really heavily on our liaisons to lead the charge with communication and facilitation within their departments. So at this stage, CAC is really taking more of an advisory role where we're rolling out those communication and risk mitigation plans, we're answering questions, directing traffic, sort of generally keeping an eye on how this project is going. And then after all the communication, the managing of questions and concerns, the following through on all the plans that we've made, we get to this final stage, sustain. And here we're continuing to monitor progress. We are reinforcing behaviors. We're starting the process of assessing our work and measuring our impact. And we can start to look for ways here that we might be able to adjust the process so that it runs even more smoothly for our next purchasing round. If this seems like a lot of work or a lot of steps to go through, it was, and it is. We integrated change management principles into each step of this project. And I think the big difference between this project and previous CAC initiatives was a notable increase in the amount of communication and transparency around the process. So we'll stop here for a quick second, and we would just like to ask for your feedback based on the information that we have shared with you to this point. How do you think that this project went? So if you could just throw into chat, maybe say yay if you think it sounds like we absolutely killed this project and could not have done any better, or say boo if you think that we totally bungled it. That's right, we're inviting you to boo us.
Lots of yays.
Thanks, guys. So y'all think we did really, really great. That's nice to hear. So let's hear directly from Scottie on what the outcomes of our efforts looked like from the liaison's point of view.
So as Allison mentioned, this definitely was an improvement from years past, particularly in regards to communication and transparency, but there continues to be some additional room for improvement going forward. So from CAC's point of view, this process was well thought out and cleanly executed. From the liaison side, we had a little bit of a different experience. So again, I'm the liaison to criminology, criminal justice, and emergency and disaster management, which is one of the largest programs on our campus, and also one that was really hit hard by these cuts, particularly the cut to the SAGE journal package. So some of the things that we experienced and that I in particular experienced were frustration that the liaisons whose programs were directly and significantly affected by these cuts were not included in the discussion. And I recognize that this could become unwieldy really, really quickly, but the risk reps on CAC can't be expected to have a deep knowledge of the resources used by students and faculty outside their subject areas. So if CAC had recognized during the planning phase that some disciplines were overrepresented on these resource cuts list, it could have been beneficial to bring in the liaisons to those subject areas at that point for consultation. And I recognize that that might not have changed the resources cut, but it could have allowed for a more informed, better analysis. Another thing experienced was some confusion around who was communicating what, to whom, and when. So were we the liaisons to communicate these cuts directly to our faculty, or would that news be coming from CAC? Likewise, when the first round of journal pickups came around, would the liaisons be communicating what titles were subscribed to the faculty requesters, or would CAC be communicating directly with those requesters? So even though this was worked out within the group, there were some missing links in the communication chain with liaisons. Also, for those of us who were not part of the last big round of cuts, and this includes me, we had some anxiety around the best way to address this with our faculty. So what were we permitted to say at what time? How could we maintain the relationships we've worked so hard to build while delivering this terrible news, and also being really firm and clear about what faculty could expect with regards to future journal pickups? And really at the most basic level, how do we even make sure that they were actually reading the information we sent to them? So I think a lot of us are familiar with sending group emails, and out of maybe 30 recipients, we get 1 or 2 responses. And that may not always be a big deal, but when communicating news of this nature that has such a deep impact to teaching and research, we really wanted to make sure that this information was getting to the people who needed to hear it. Finally, we had some frustration that the lists provided by publishers were incomplete. So often it can be really fruitless to try to rely on journal package lists because we rely so much on access-only titles in these lists, and those drop in and out of a package at a moment's notice. So expecting a fully comprehensive list of titles can be an unreasonable ask. But with cuts of this nature, making sure that the liaisons had accurate resources is paramount. And we found that when we were providing these lists that we didn't really know were incomplete, and then learning from faculty that in fact there were key titles missing from the list, that really created and added our own sense of anxiety with this perception, at least in my mind, that perhaps we lacked the skills to adequately represent our faculty and students' research and teaching needs.
So that's not what we expected to happen. But what went wrong, right? For those, I don't know if anyone booed us, but if you did, you were correct. But what happened, right? We followed all of the steps, we checked all the boxes, we did all the things, and yet there were still some negative outcomes here. So what can we do going forward? And that's where this thing of beauty comes in. This is the Noster model for managing complex change. And according to the Noster model, there are 5 elements that need to come together to produce effective change. And if any of these elements are missing, it's going to lead to a specific negative outcome. So quickly just touching on each of these elements. Vision relates to the explanation of why a change is needed and how it's supposed to happen. So this can very clearly be linked to that defined stage of the process. Skills. This piece answers questions like, do I have the skills necessary to implement this change? Am I going to get proper training? Things like that come up, skills come up and play heavily into the planning phase when you're considering things like communication and training plans. Incentive, the all-important what's in it for me. This element crosses into every stage of the process because you can't sustain engagement without initiatives. That's just not how people work. Resources. Do I have what I need to navigate this change? What resources are available to me? Are those resources being distributed fairly? Again, resources touches on each stage of the process. And then finally, action plan. So what specific steps do I need to take to get this to the finish line? And again, this is a major part of the define stage where, of course, that's the stage that's probably most likely to be rushed through or sort of slapped together at the last minute. So looking back at some of the outcomes that Scottie discussed, we can see that the liaisons felt frustrated, anxious, and confused. And then we can use the Noster model to make sense of those outcomes and try to arrive at some actionable adjustments to our process. So upon reflection, CAT can do a better job going forward of defining the roles and responsibilities up front to improve understanding of our vision and to reduce confusion. We can make an effort to better ensure the people that we're relying on to implement our plans have the skills they need to feel successful. And we can also better employ the skills of our subject matter experts earlier in the process to alleviate anxieties. And then finally, we can look for ways to increase access to the resources we make available. So things specifically like our time and support to keep frustration to a minimum. So was CAC's change management-led project a rousing success? Not exactly, but did we learn some really important things that are going to enable us to improve and move forward in a productive way? We did.
So the big takeaways from this process are, first, communication and engagement are not the same thing. Flooding people with information doesn't necessarily mean that the information is usable or that people understand why they should care. Going forward, CAC may want to look for ways to prioritize and measure engagement better. Additionally, access to shared documents is not the same thing as transparency. And again, going forward, CAC can do a better job of engaging stakeholders earlier to ensure that they fully understand the decision-making process, as opposed to simply having artifacts to those decisions after they've been made.
And then the biggest takeaway that we hope everyone gets from this presentation is that change management is an iterative process. So just following the steps of the process by no means guarantees smooth sailing. No matter how well you manage a change initiative, there is no such thing as a flawless project. There will always be elements outside your control or good intentions gone awry. The important thing here is to use this change management process to build yourself a framework that you can then use to evaluate your projects. This is really going to help take a lot of that guesswork out of untangling the inevitable issues that you're going to encounter when attempting to institute any type of change. And it's going to help to ensure that you're in a position to continually improve and keep things moving in a positive direction. So does anyone have any burning questions about change management?
This is Donna Nixon. I am curious about what you think you could have done differently as far as, I think, I'm not sure what stage, maybe in the implementation stage, as far as engagement is concerned, especially talking about the liaison librarians and faculty.
I think that we would have benefited from being a lot more specific in the communication sort of outlines or templates that we were providing. And it also probably would have been helpful in hindsight if we had taken a more targeted departmental approach to the way we were communicating. So I know, personally speaking for myself, I sent an email to my normal distribution list within the College of Business, which is the entire College of Business. And it might have been more beneficial to sort of target each individual program or these smaller groups on an individual basis to personalize and hopefully create some engagement in that way. So I hope that answers your question, Donna. don't know if there are things coming in through chat I can't see.
Yeah, Allison, we got a question related to incentives we used for this change.
So the incentive was the opportunity to have a title picked up. We had no control over the fact that we needed to make cuts. I mean, that's just a fact of life, unfortunately. But we thought we were providing an incentive to our teaching faculty to engage in this conversation early up front so that they would either not lose access at all to a particularly cherished journal or something that they use pretty frequently, or if they were to lose access, that we would be able to repurchase that with some of this earmarked funding. So that was sort of the intended incentive, was to provide them an opportunity to weigh in and have their voice heard.
All right. Thank you all so much for sharing your work today. It was really wonderful and helpful to hear about everyone's projects. And it was really great to hear some feedback from our attendees as well. I think we will wrap things up for a short 4 to 5 minute break until we head into our 2:50 sessions. Thank you all.